the biggest issue in AI today, beyond people making up titles like prompt engineer, is our hallucinations. So I actually ran a poll on this a little recently, and I asked how easy this is to solve. And for those that are joining us who aren't aware of what hallucinations are, this is basically where a model will make up an answer that's not real. So, for example, within the Argo Slack, I know we had some users who, right when ChatGPT launched, they basically would take every question somebody posted, throw it in ChatGPT, and spit the answer back. And ChatGPT was making up spec that didn't exist. So it'd be like, oh, solve that this way. Run, you just add this config and it'll work. And that config wasn't valid for Argo CD because the spec literally didn't exist. It would have been what it came up with was a great spec, would have been nice, but it didn't exist. So asking users just on my Twitter feed how they thought this would be solved, about half of people thought it was unsolvable, that there was maybe no way to ever solve the issue of hallucinations. Now, within the context of K8sGPT, where there's a lot of context that's sort of fed into it, have you seen this as an issue? Have people reported hallucinations kind of leading them astray as they've been trying to resolve issues?
Almost never, because we're providing it such a small amount of parameters, right? We're talking hundreds or maybe thousands of parameters versus millions. Mm-hmm. And we're also on the APIs where we can, is we're setting the temperature to 0, right? So when the temperature is a parameter that influences the model's output generating text, right? High temperature means that it's diverse, it's random, and it's more likely to create hallucinations, whereas 0 is more focused on the likely outcome. That coupled with it being such a small subset of parameters, I've not seen anything that's hallucination. What we have seen is advice that's not very helpful, right? That's a different thing, right? It's saying like, okay, maybe try looking at your stateful set, but that's more to do with the limitation on the corpus of data than it is to do with it hallucinating. Now, I think that it's a good point because, as you start to place more reliance on this, there will become an expectation that it's always right. And I feel like having high quality open source models that we know have really good data in them is going to be the way that we're able to start to ratify the things that it's saying deterministically. One of the features that we've been thinking of adding in is an ability to say, like, did that actually help you, right? Was that actually a useful answer? Because then we can complete that feedback loop. And as we start to use things like Kubeflow to train our own models, we can then get K8sGPT to do a dump of JSON or whatever to say, yeah, that was a useful answer, that one wasn't, et cetera, almost like an opt-in thing for users. And that then can become part of our training data set so that we can start to make more and more accurate models.
Well, it does seem like with that data set that you're building, you can almost get to the point of being very predictive on pull requests to saying, yeah, this thing is probably going to cause an issue. And you said some users are actually doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it definitely feels like it could get really, really strong. And so if you're building like your service level objectives, you could have a really good sense from if I merge, if this is a potential issue. And I like this kind of quorum idea about waiting. Hey, well, there's a business level objective here. Is that going to be met? Hey, there's a security objective. Is that going to be met? There's other remediation concerns and things like that. And I was thinking about an outage that happened a few years ago with the famous GitLab outage. Not to pick on them, they're kind of a competitor, frenemy for Codefresh, right? Because we both we compete on the pipeline side, but we have a lot of users who are using GitLab for source code management and stuff like that. But they had an issue where basically one of their database copies went down. I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was kind of a flow where they took several steps where when it was viewed as a whole, it was very clear that it was going to destroy the site because they lost user data. They ended up losing, I think, like 6 hours of commits or something like that. And I thought, if they had a tool like K8sGPT involved here, it probably would have told them and inferred for them very rapidly what the actual root cause of the issue was. And it also would have told them not to do what their plan was, and they could have even bounced their plan off of it, and it would have had the context of what was happening. And that's something I was curious with K8sGPT is, right now it's sort of a one-way conversation where I say, hey, go and analyze this, and it gives me stuff. But it would be interesting too if I could actually come back to it and say, okay, you flagged this issue, I've checked these things, what else should I check? And there's not a way to do that right now, right? You can't just put in a generic prompt for something.
No, so I think what you're describing sounds a lot like interactive mode, right? And this is something I kind of designed in my head, but we haven't implemented yet. So you imagine your analyze command, you add that interactive flag, and you go into sort of a prompt, right? And it's like comes out with an answer for each one. You could say, right, I tried that, it worked. This answers the previous thing I was talking about with creating out, telling us if you got it right or not. And you say, no, it didn't work. Like press N to continue. Then you can start to say, I think I'm going to try restarting the node. And because it has all that rich context data, because it's connected to your K8s cluster, the actual prompt you're sending the AI, whether it's local or remote, is super relevant, right? You can give it all this really rich data. And I think this is a great place to extend it to. It feels like having a more interactive approach also would start to really legitimize it for newbies as well, and people who are really just kind of figuring out that space. Because I think really the thing that AI gives us that we're sort of not really yet identifying is that it's a crystallization of knowledge. That's it, right? We're really densely crystallizing knowledge into this model that we can get back out again, and that could be normally the span of lifetimes of having to learn, but we're accelerating that to minutes. So yeah, being able to interact with it a bit more, I think, is a really great shout, and I think that's something we'll see on the horizon.